was on my way to get married.
Paid presentation and does not necessarily reflect the policies or opinions of Cablevision of Central Florida. You're watching CV's community programming channel, CV 16.
Campaign 92. Candidate Forum with Steve DeMino, candidate for Florida Senate, District 14. Your host, Mark Barker.
With us is Steve DeMino, Republican candidate for the Florida Senate, District 14.
Hi, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Nice to be with you, too, Steve. Before we get out into the audience and break up for some questions to you, let's find out a little bit about Steve DeMino.
Okay.
You're 57.
Right.
Just recently, I believe.
Right.
Had a birthday.
Right.
Big birthday party?
I appreciate you reminding me.
Born and raised in New York.
Yes.
And you and your wife, Fran is here, I believe, is she
Right,
not?
she's sitting right over there.
Hi, Fran. Nice to have you with us. Lovely lady.
Married 34 years.
34 years.
Right.
And you had 3 sons?
3 sons.
And 1 grandson.
And 1 grandson. Andrew.
Okay. Is Andrew with us tonight?
He's 2 years prior to Hurricane Andrew.
Oh.
But he's a little tornado.
We can't blame it on him, can we? All right. And you're a financial investment consultant.
That's right.
All right. Can you give me a little bit of idea about what a financial investment consultant is?
Well, basically, I am licensed in 3 sciences of finance. I am a stockbroker, insurance broker, and a real estate broker. And in 1982, the chairman of the board of the Travelers, which is the 18th largest diversified financial institution in America, asked me if I would be the financial advisor for all Travelers employees. And I accepted that responsibility. And basically what I do is advise employees and their families on how to start a business, save in their assets and accumulate assets, buy homes, purchase insurance, consult with them regarding their retirement benefits, 401k plans, and just basically make them feel secure with their finances or set up a plan to make them feel secure.
Primarily dealing with individuals.
Right.
And with small businesses.
Individuals and small businesses.
They may be involved in. Well, you've also had quite a long history and diverse history of involvement in the community, I believe. Right. One thing that intrigues me is that you served on the State Advisory Committee for Independent Colleges and Universities.
Correct. In 1987, Governor Bob Martinez appointed me to the State Board of Independent Colleges and Universities. And during the 5 years that followed, having served on the Finance Committee, Budget Committee, Legislative Committee, and the Executive Committee, I was voted to become the Vice Chairman of the board by the various presidents of the colleges and universities. And then in 1991, towards the end of 1991, Governor Childs reappointed me to the board, and I appeared before both Senates and was confirmed by both Senates, and I've served for the past 5 years on behalf of the citizens of the state of Florida without compensation.
And you've also served on some other boards and committees and the like, have you not?
Yes, I have.
And you've been a very active member, I know, of the Seminole and Orange County Board of Realtors.
Correct.
And the Seminole and Orange County Chamber of Commerce.
Correct.
And you've also been involved with the American Heart Association.
Yes.
And the Friends of Wekiva River.
Right.
The Guardian Ad, and you have to pronounce that for me.
That's the Guardian Ad Litem Prevention of Child Abuse.
Okay. And the American Federation of Police.
Right.
And we've just touched on a very few of the things that you've been involved in. You've also won a lot of awards, I believe.
Right.
Now, there was one biggie with Travelers, I believe, was there not?
Right.
What was that one all about?
I was, actually I won it twice, and there was 10 years spread, but it's the National Leaders Award, which is given to the outstanding financial producers and client who service their clients in an outstanding capacity. And I was honored in just recently in 1990. And I guess out of 36,000 agents throughout the world, that's bestowed upon maybe the top 200.
And I know you were also closely involved in the beginning of the University of Central Florida football program.
Right.
Was that a particular love of yours, football?
Well, you know, when you move to Florida, most of us are transplants in a sense, and we leave our universities and alma maters behind, so you search for friends and people that you can enjoy your life with. And I met some great people over at the University of Central Florida, and some of us who were on the sports committee of the chamber, like Donald Disney and Don Jonas and Manny Garcia from Dagbar, who owns Burger King's. We got together one day and sat down and said, UCF needs a football team, and we wanted to call it the Fighting Knights. And so we each chipped in $500 each, and we became stockholders. So I have a certificate of stock, which is probably the most valuable piece of stock I own because of its memories. But we launched the Fighting Knights, and of course now you know they're in Division I, which is a dream come true. And I remember when we had 600 to 800 people watching the game, and now we have 20,000 watching. And it's a wonderful thing, and we received a lot of support, and I'm sure it's benefiting the community.
Well, you've come a long way since you began, I believe, back in New York as a paper boy.
Paper boy for the Brooklyn Eagle.
You were tossing those papers up on the yard, getting
Right.
on football practice there?
7 cents a week is what we received in compensation, but the customers gave me 25-cent tips, so that was
Made it all worthwhile.
more than enough compensation.
And you were a grocery clerk, I believe, and a
Right.
plumber's helper.
Right.
And then you went into service
Right.
in, what, 1954, I believe?
1954, my stepfather, whom I love very much, he passed away just a few years ago, but he was a great inspiration to me. He was a hard-working man, and he approached me one day and said, I love your mother very much, and we want to live a very happy life, and we need you to do something, and but I want you to know I'd never be able to send you to college. And so he said, but if you join the Army and don't get killed, you can go to college under the GI Bill. And so I thought that was a pretty good deal.
After you discharge, an honorable discharge, of course, you worked as an electromechanical draftsman.
Right.
And that was a kind of a far-fetched thing for
Right.
you, was it not?
When I was discharged in 1956, my family had moved to Garden City, Long Island. And I had taken 1,000 hours of drafting in my senior year of high school, and I decided to put that to use. I like to draw, and so I went to American Bosch Armor Corporation and applied for a position as a junior draftsman.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they received a contract to build the inertial guidance system for the Atlas and the Titan. And I always wanted to work on that particular system, but it took a while. A few years later, I became a senior electromechanical design draftsman and did work on the inertial guidance system.
You bring up education there, and I think this is an interesting part of your background, is that you said that you were not able to go to school because of the financial crunch, but you did go to school, but
Right.
you went at night school when,
Right.
when you were
Right.
working. And you got an associate degree in,
Industrial management,
and then you got a bachelor's
bachelor of
degree.
science degree in business administration.
And I believe you're working on a master's degree at this
Right,
moment, is
right.
that right?
I attend Schiller International University, which is out of Heidelberg, Germany. They have 6 campuses in 6 countries throughout the world. And so I went to London and spent 2 months in London and studied with 240 students from all over the world. I visited House of Parliament and House of Lords and observed English politics and studied international relations, foreign diplomacy, and wrote 3 papers on economic development and women's suffrage in third world countries, terrorism, and also studied the Middle East.
Okay. Where'd you find time to run the New York City Marathon?
Oh, well, I kind of have always felt to be healthy, one needed to be holistically, mentally, and financially healthy. And I think all 3 go together. And education was a part of being not only holistically but intelligently healthy. And so I went to school at nights and trained at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I found it very invigorating. And the president of the Road and Track of America said that I should train for the marathon, and I did. It took 9 months to train, and I ran with Jean-Claude Killy and Floyd Patterson and Ingemar Johansson, and I missed my predicted time of 3 hours and 38 minutes, which is 8-minute miles, by 3 minutes. It was 3 hours and 41 minutes and 57 seconds, but it rained for 26 miles for 3 hours. And I bought these shoes, which were 11-ounce shoes, for $99. I think they were the first $99 pair of shoes. And by the end of the race, they were like 2 concrete blocks, you know.
A little sodden, huh?
Yeah, right.
Well, I know that was a lot of fun, but your life has not totally been fun, because you told me about an interesting experience with your grandfather that has had a dramatic effect on your life. Can you comment on that?
Well, my grandfather actually was my friend, my father, my grandfather, and I was very concerned about him not having enough money when he retired. And when I was 15, he gave me his checkbook to manage, because he never knew what a checkbook was, and neither did anyone else. They were brand new. So I explained to him what a checkbook was, and I didn't know what it was, but we learned together, so he had me write out all his checks. And I always saw the balance there, and whenever the balance got low, I would ask him, how was he going to pay his bills? And so he constantly reminded me of his pension that he was going to receive someday. And when the time came, he told me to go to his company to find out if the pension was there. And he worked for 32 years for a lithographing company. And I called and made an appointment and went there. And it was actually my first time in a boardroom at 24. And it was kind of intimidating. Mm. But my focus was on, is my grandfather going to receive his pension? And they all looked at each other, and I had a feeling that he wasn't going to receive it. And then they told me no. And I asked why, and they said, well, he had a break in service. And today that means, well, back in those days, service meant continuous service. And today we have 5-year vesting periods, 10-year vesting periods, etc. But in those days, it was a non-interrupted 20-year vesting period. And I asked why he wouldn't receive the pension, and they said, well, there was a strike. And he went out on strike with the rest of the boys. And I said, well, why is that so unnatural? And they said, well, that's a break in service. I said, how long was he out on strike? And he said about 10 days or 15 days. And so he was not going to get his pension. Needless to say, I kept telling my grandfather he would get his pension, because I was determined to figure out a way to get his pension. But he died never getting his pension. But he didn't know that.
But I think that probably the most, I guess the lowest point in your life was when your son Adam was killed in a motorcycle accident.
Right, yeah.
And that was just before he was graduating from high school.
Right, Adam was captain of Lyman High School track team, and in his yearbook, which was published prior to his death, which he never saw, he was voted most likable boy in Lyman High. He was born on Christmas Eve. He helped me stop smoking, helped me become a runner, and he was an outstanding young man. I think of him all the time. I think that's what drives me.
Well, it's certainly a fascinating life you've had, Steve. And now you're willing and determined to jump into this political arena and cast your hat there for the Florida Senate in District 14. Why?
Somebody has to do it, and I think the people need representation. I think I'm prepared. I am not afraid. I fear no one. And we are in a crisis situation. And I've walked the straight and narrow for 40 years. And I think that we need change, drastic change, not evolutionary and not necessarily revolutionary, but I think I know what has to be done and how it could be done.
Certainly with your fiscal background, financial planning, it sounds like something that the state of Florida could use at this particular time.
Well, our population is growing by 30%. Our prison population is growing by 104%. We have people in prison who are, many who should not be there if they had the proper schooling and the proper opportunity for jobs, especially too many young people. And I've seen it everywhere I've traveled all over the world, even in London in 1990. There are thousands and thousands of young kids just sleeping in the doorways because they don't have opportunity.
We're going to get into some of those issues that I know you have some pretty strong positions on in just a moment. But first we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Before it's too late, change the face of politics by calling Central Florida's first telephone town hall. Call 244-8585 and voice your opinions on the issues facing our state. Speak out, Florida. Call 244-8585 and be heard in the telephone town hall. Time is running out, and Florida Senate candidate Steve DeMino wants to hear from you. To learn more, watch Steve DeMino Candidate Forum Thursday evening at 7 on Cable Channel 16 and vote Steve DeMino for Florida Senate, District 14.
We're back. Thank you. We're back with Steve DeMino, Republican candidate for District 14, Florida Senate. Steve, we've got an audience full of questions out here, and one of the things I know they're interested in is your stand on education. Do you want to start us off by giving us a few remarks on education?
Well, we know that while walking precincts, I think the most interesting or startling comment that a mother made was that, do you know that I have to fill my children's lunch boxes with pencils, pads, and supplies? And I said, how much does that cost? And she said, for all 3 children, I cannot afford it. And so, based on that, I believe we have some serious problems, because prior to that, I would suspect it was difficult even putting peanut butter sandwich in a lunchbox. Now we have to put school supplies. And I believe I know firsthand of why that's not necessary and how it could be changed.
Why?
Well, for one reason, we have a great deal of administration. And if we look at education, just think about this little red schoolhouse, a teacher and 20 students. And today we have basically a school, students, a teacher, but hundreds of acres of land and trucks and cars and lawnmowers and hundreds of employees supporting that same schoolhouse. And I feel that I have some firsthand insight when you look at the public institutions versus the private institutions. You know, in private schools they have administrators and teachers. And when administrators aren't administrating, they're teaching. And when teachers aren't teaching, they're administrating. So we need to balance the resources that we have in education and put it back into the schoolroom. And we can do that by taking lottery funds and having them directed directly to education and not back into the general revenue fund, which is something that I'd like to see done immediately. And I think it will be done because there's an awful lot of emphasis on that today.
Steve, we've heard that the way to solve all of our education problems is to increase taxes and raise more money, and that will solve all of our problems. We saw a confrontation in Tallahassee this year with those elected officials who came down in support of increased taxes and those who said, no, let's hold the line on taxes and control our spending. When you're in Tallahassee, which side are you going to come down on?
Okay, the Florida Tax Watch, which is an independent group of individuals who dedicate themselves to watching the budget, and we have the budget right here. I read it every day, and any one of us can take a look at this budget and decide it's not necessary, we don't need as much staff, and quite frankly, Florida Tax Watch identified 279 wasteful items in our budget which can be eliminated, and subsequently returned $1.4 billion back into the general revenue funds to be used for education. Our population, I mentioned before, grew by 30%, but our taxes grew 171%. Medicaid is up 570%. And last month alone, Medicaid surpassed, HRS, the expenditure in HRS exceeded education for the first time in the state of Florida. So now we have welfare exceeding education. And so you can actually say that Florida has become a welfare state for the first time in its history. And so we need to not only trim the budget, we need to reduce expenditures, and we have to really take a look at all these different agencies that we have, and perhaps start out what I call zero-based budgeting. In other words, we have automatic budgets in the state of Florida, automatic increases in our budgets, and the legislature cannot do anything about that. And what I'm recommending is that every 4 years, that every agency in the state of Florida starts out new, zero-based budgeting, look at their resources, look at their mission, and determine, is that mission still necessary? Do we need the same amount of people?
That's sort of like sunsetting the budget, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
Hang on to those thoughts. We'll be right back with you in just a second, Steve, with some more questions. But right now, a short break. We'll be right back.
Steve DeMino supports a woman's right to choose, supports seizure law reform, and supports education reform. Mr. DeMino opposes a personal income tax in Florida, opposes automatic pay raises for legislators, and opposes government waste and abuse. Mr. DeMino is also the first candidate to offer a telephone town hall to enable you, the voters, to speak out. Call 244-8585 and be heard on the issues. To learn more, watch Steve DeMino Candidate Forum Thursday evening at 7 on Cable Channel 16 and vote Steve DeMino for Florida Senate, District 14.
We're back again with Steve DeMino, Republican candidate for the Florida Senate, District 14. Now, Steve, I believe some questions are in the audience here.
Right.
They've been agitating about getting some questions in here.
What are we gonna do about the cost of medication?
Interesting. It's too high? Well, I think that as we look at the population in the state of Florida, there are some 2 million people who are not covered by health insurance, and a great deal many people who are uninsurable, and then there's an awful lot of people who do have coverage, but it's too expensive. And I was wondering if we could take another poll, and another poll meaning, as your senator representing my own constituency, I would ask if we were all in my district, I would ask each and every one of you, how much would you be willing to pay per month if it would provide all the answers to, or some of the, at least 90% health insurance? So if I were to ask you, could you afford $100 a month? How many of you would say, okay, if I'll pay $100 a month?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we took a poll throughout the state of Florida and we asked how many people can afford X, that would be one poll. Then we would know at least how much money we can collect from all of those who said okay. The second is we would ask all of those who are currently paying premiums. How much are you currently paying? If you're currently paying that, would you continue to pay that, or if it could be reduced by $50 or $75 a month, would you be willing to do that? So now you have those who would be willing to pay X and those who are currently paying X. I would take a look at that entire dollar amount, entertain that dollar amount to 14 of the largest carriers in the state, in the United States, and say, could you provide insurance for every Floridian for that amount of money? And so that's a place to start. And then, of course, there would be some basic deductible. But I think we can do that by bringing the public involved, the insurance carriers involved, and then also understanding the education that you need involved to reduce costs.
Okay, we got a question over here.
Steve, I'm really concerned about the family. There's been a lot of talk about the family and the family system. Right now, I work in an industry where a lot of families are losing their homes due to a job lost and a lot of other different factors. What would you do to try and change what's going on in Florida right now to make the family system a little bit more stable?
Okay. Well, first of all, we know that 70% of the workforce is comprised of women, and it's placing a great deal of strain on families all over the world, that the woman not only has to work and provide for the family, but then also come home and take care of the family as a provider, and that is creating a great deal of strain. When one of the family members, or if it's a single family home, loses their job, then the entire structure is destroyed. And for those people who are just beginning in life, who've just purchased a home, who've just purchased their first automobile, just starting out in life, don't have a savings account, the effects could be devastating. And then I've been counseling with some people in which they've stated it could take a decade to reverse the process. And so we need steady employment, but we need a diversified industrial base, not employment that is geared to only one or two industries, because it could be devastating. But people and families who buy homes, we need to do something to protect them from not losing their home, perhaps looking at some sort of a period of time when you lose your job that the bank and or financial institutions will not just jump on these people immediately because they lost their job.
I think you struck a nerve here. We got a lot of questions coming at you.
Yes, Steve, I'd like to know, how do you feel about equal opportunity in the workplace? Do you feel like blacks have an opportunity time as well as the white people in the workforce? Or what would you do to make it a better workforce for the black people also?
Okay. Again, it starts with education, and everyone needs to be educated, and the workforce now is comprised of all types of people. In the state of Florida, we have, it's not only a black and a white workforce. In the state of Florida, we're surrounded by water on three sides. We have people from all over the world coming to the state of Florida. And we need equal opportunity for everyone. And we need equal opportunity for education. We need equal opportunity for children. We need equal opportunity for women. And I believe education can take care of that, but we all need to understand the issue and be very sensitive to that and be very helpful to each other. And I believe our president said it best also when he said we need to stop suing each other and start caring for each other. And I think that's what we should do. So we need to
Steve,
do that.
I know you'd love to keep answering questions,
Yes.
but our time is running out.
Okay,
We're going to have
thank
to
you.
have to say thank you very much for being with us here. It has been a pleasure to have you, Steve, in our Campaign 92 Candidate Forum, and very pleasant to have all our members of our studio audience with us as well. And we wish you the very best in your Senate race.
Thank you very much, Mark. I enjoyed being here.
Thank you.
In-kind production services for this program were provided by Mark Barker, Michael Bradkey, Matthew Ellis, Vivek Sharma, Howard Ginser, Bruce Barker, and Raffaella Ellis. The preceding program was a paid political advertisement paid for by the Steve DeMino Campaign Fund, Republican. The views, opinions, and ideas expressed in this program are not necessarily those of this broadcast station or cable service.
The previous program was a paid presentation. Views and opinions expressed were not necessarily those of Cablevision of Central Florida. This is CV's community programming channel, CV 16.